Hello everybody, Roger here again, and today I am taking you out to Mitchell Bay on Malkosaari, Malcolm Island. So let's talk about Mitchell Bay. Now this here is the visitor map that you can get at the info center in downtown Sointala of Malcolm Island and the town of Sointala. So here you could see Sointala's here, and today we're going out to Mitchell Bay. So you would be following this road here from town, it's First Street. As you pass the graveyard point where the cemetery is, it turns into Cleaver Road, and we're going out here. This here is Blooms's Bay, also known as Impilahti in Finnish, the place of Hope's Bay. And we are just right here at the start of what is the Mitchell Bay Road. So you turn up this hillside here, which is also known locally as the Garbage Dump Hill, and you would follow this road all the way up to the crossroads, which has also been known as Four Corners. And we're going to follow this road all the way along the logging roads until we get out to Mitchell Bay. And I'll explain more once we get out to Mitchell Bay. And here I'm standing on Cleaver Road at the beginning of the Garbage Dump Hill, also the beginning of the Mitchell Bay Road. And I'm going to be following the Garbage Dump Hill until I get to the top, and I'll be following Mitchell Bay Road all the way out to Mitchell Bay. Let's go. Little baby deer crossing the road. And here we're at the top of the Garbage Dump Hill. If I were to carry on up that way, that would take me up to the left there. That would take me up to the old garbage dump and the beacon. But today we're heading out this way, out to Mitchell Bay. The Mitchell Bay Road is very rutty and full of potholes, so you have to drive carefully and try to avoid the potholes. So most people drive in the middle of the road whenever there's a pothole area, like right here, and it's really bad, so you avoid most of them. And the reason for all these potholes is because there's a lot of logging that goes on in the middle of Malkosaari, Malcolm Island, and they use these logging roads to transport logs back and forth. One of the nice things about the Mitchell Bay Road in the summertime, there is lots of foxglove and daisies that grow along the side of the road. I'm approaching the end of the season for foxglove, so I wanted to make this video before they go to seed so that you can still see some of the flowering that goes along the banks of the Mitchell Bay Road. So since I'm in the area, I'm going to just do a slight detour here and go off of the main Mitchell Bay Road. There's quite a dip here just off the road. Ooh, made it. And in here is the local gun range. So let's go explore it. So here at the gun range on Malkosaari, Malcolm Island, which is pretty much in the center of the island, you could see there was once this gravel pit where you get sand from, and still locals come here and grab sand. But you could see the layers of the sediment. And Malkosaari, Malcolm Island is all glacial till from the last ice age, which formed the island. And this was all up in a dirty iceberg, glacier once a long time ago, and that when it melted just left these layers of sediment that formed the island over 10,000 years ago. And this is what the gun range looks like. It's basically just this flat area here, and down below there's some places where you could sight in your gun, and hunters come here in the fall to sight in their gun when they're going out hunting. So a couple cars just passed us on the Mitchell Bay Road, so you can see it gets really dusty here. And as you can tell, the truck's really shaking because there's a lot of ruts in the road right now. So referring back to the map, here we are now at the crossroads. And I'm gonna just look up. I'm gonna be heading down towards Mitchell Bay. There's a car coming right now really fast down the road. Now, at one time, Malkosaari Island was just full of swamps, and it still is pretty swampy. Off to my left is a large area called Isosuo in Finnish, which means big swamp. And I'll explore that in another video. But today we're going out to Mitchell Bay. So I'm at the end of the foxglove season here, but you can still see some of the foxgloves growing along the side of the road, and when you're here when they're in full bloom, it's quite nice. Tucked away just off the road, off of the main Mitchell Bay Road, there's this old logging road, and if you were to follow this all the way down, it would tie into the Cat Road that goes through the upper portion of Rauhla. And I haven't went exploring that in a YouTube video yet, but in the future I'll be exploring the Cat Road at Rauhla. Here's the start of the daisies. Now there's another neat thing when I was a kid growing up here on Malkosaari Island, and every time we would go for a drive out the Mitchell Bay Road, my parents would get me to look for this stump that someone dressed up as a fisherman. It was wearing like rain gear and stuff, and they called it Lonesome Charlie. And someone decided then that Lonesome Charlie needs a mate, so eventually Lonesome Charlie had a girlfriend, and they eventually had some kids. So it was like this small little stump family dressed up as fishermen along the Mitchell Bay Road. And then there was even a turned up canoe that looked like a centipede at one point in time, a long time ago. So I'm currently right about here on the map, which is the top of the hill just before you get down into Mitchell Bay. You go down this big long hill, and I'm right at the top of the hill here. And this is what the top of the hill looks like. Going down that way will take me to Mitchell Bay. And this here was the access road, the old road that used to take you to Mitchell Bay before this current road here existed a very long time ago, and it is not maintained. But if I were to go to Lizard Point one day, I'll have to go down this road in order to get there. But today, again, we are going to Mitchell Bay. So let's go down here. So years ago, I'm thinking it was in the 1970s, I don't think it was the 1980s, there was logging operation that was going on the island, and the logging company wanted to use a herbicide to get rid of the alders, and the Women's Auxiliary to the Fishermen's Union objected to it because they were potentially contaminating the fish-bearing creeks that go down along Big Swamp and area on Malkosaari, Malcolm Island. So the empty barrel drums are somewhere buried up in this area here. Here we go down the hill to Mitchell Bay. So at one time, when I was a kid, somewhere down, probably around this bend here, there was this big old growth tree in the middle of the road on the way down to Mitchell Bay. And at some point it fell over. I think it happened in the 1990s. And there was a windstorm and the tree fell over, and then they got rid of the tree. But you used to have to drive. There was a road on either side of the tree to get around it. This is an older map of Malkosaari, Malcolm Island that used to buy in town during the early 1990s. And I'm just going to zoom in here to Mitchell Bay. And right here you could see the whereabouts of that old tree that used to go in between the road on the way down to Mitchell Bay. And here it mentions that old tree, old cedar tree on road to Mitchell Bay. And here we are now entering Mitchell Bay, also known as Impilahti in Finnish, which means Virgin Bay. Now today, Mitchell Bay seems like its own little village outside of the town of Sointala on Malkosaari, Malcolm Island, but its history is actually integrated into the town of Sointala and is part of Sointala. And here we have Mitchell Bay, Impilahti in Finnish, Virgin Bay. And if I were to follow this beach along down that way for quite a ways, I would eventually get to Rauhala. Now Mitchell Bay is notorious for friendly deer. It's like a sanctuary for deer. And you'll see a lot of really friendly deer that don't really mind people at all. Mitchell Bay is a very artsy place, so you'll see a lot of art sculptures. There was a lady in Rough Bay who moved years ago and brought with her all these cement dinosaur sculptures, and when she passed away, the sculptures ended up going place to place. Some of them are out here in Mitchell Bay. I've actually got a few of them myself. This is one of them here that greets you as you're entering into Mitchell Bay. One of the main industries on Malcolm Island has always been logging right from the very start, and this logging sort here has been here for a very long time. I don't fully know the history of it, but it's active right to this day. And here we are in Mitchell Bay, Impilahti, Virgin Bay, on Malkosaari, Malcolm Island. So Mitchell Bay Road hasn't changed that much once you enter into Mitchell Bay since I was a kid. However, there are some newly renovated buildings, and it's mostly rich people that come here as a summer home now, but there are a few local residents that still reside here in Mitchell Bay, so there's people here, and it's a small little community all year round. And it's got this neat vibe to it. In the 60s, to avoid being drafted in the Vietnam War, a lot of draft dodgers came in the hippie movement here, and it became like this little commune for hippies. And it's still got that artsy fartsy vibe to it from that hippie time period. And you'll see a lot of neat little structures along the road, cabins, saunas, and little artsy things that I'll show you here along the way. I'm stopping right here because I want to show you something right in this particular spot. Just right off the road here in this area, there is a small cemetery right up in there. I'll zoom in so you can see. There's one of the graves. And here are those graves along the Mitchell Bay Road. They belong to the Turner family, who once owned quite a bit of land here, and they still live out in Mitchell Bay. And this is the Mitchell Bay School, and it is no longer a school. It has been a school for a very long time, but it is now a private residence. But it's along the Mitchell Bay Road. At one time, my grandmother on my dad's side of the family, Ellen Langfist, at the time her maiden name was Pupera, she went to this school. And I actually have a letter and one of her art books from when she went to the Cleva school a very long time ago. And Mitchell Bay's got this old-time vibe to it, almost like a little farmingville. You see this giant alder tree just off the side of the road here, which is really neat. Most alders, when they get that old, don't survive. And you'll see when I get around this bend here, you'll see some little cabins on the beach side and some neat cabins that are built out of driftwood. Here's one here. And this is the end of the Mitchell Bay Road. As you go up this hill, this is the start of Land's End Road, which is at the very tip of the eastern part of Malkosaari, Malcolm Island. So this is looking back towards Mitchell Bay. I'm at Donegal Head now, just past the bay. If you go past that far point, you'll eventually get to Rauhla. And from where I currently am, you're looking towards the Pierce Islands. And from Rauhla, there's this island off in the distance, and it's called Stubbs Island. That is Stubbs Island there. In Finnish, it's called the Rusin Limpusaari, or Russian Loaf Island. And I'm just going to walk around the bend here, around Donegal Head, which in Finnish is called Köyhäniemi, which means poor man's point. So I'm looking at Stubbs Island here from the very tip of the eastern tip of Malkosaari, Malcolm Island at Donegal Head, Köyhäniemi. And out there right now are some whales, and I'm hoping they're going to surface again. Now, another thing I should note, to the left of Stubbs Island there, Stubbs Island being that island right there, is Blackfish Sound. In Finnish, it's Whales Salmi, which means whale sound. And the blackfish being the killer whales. And it's called that because it's a passage the whales frequently go through. So here we are at the eastern tip of Malkosaari, Malcolm Island on Donegal Head, also known in Finnish as Poor Man's Point, which is Köyhäniemi in Finnish. And they called it that because it was all this clay bank here and didn't have the most farmable land. So they considered it poor man's land way back in the day. And this is a part of the island I don't frequently come to. You can see there's a lot of sports fishing boats out there on the water. And I've lived in Malkosaari, Malcolm Island most of my life. I've lived other places, but oh, there's whales directly out there. And I have never got to explore most of these islands out there. I remember when I was a kid, my dad had this old boat called the Wampus. It was just a skiff, and we would go to some of these islands, and somewhere on out there's this big crack that goes right through one of the islands. Like an earthquake split the island in half. And you're looking straight out in front of me is Vallis Salmi, or Blackfish Sound. And that island there, this is the closest point from Malkosaari, Malcolm Island to Ruusinlimpussaari, or Stubbs Island. And really what Stubbs Island is this big spire. It's like a pillar sticking out of the water, and that's the very tip of the pillar. And it was carved by the glaciers. And that mountain there on Vancouver Island, directly in front of me, is Elephant Mountain, another view of Elephant Mountain. Now, somewhere down there towards Blackfish Sound, it's not in visible range, but on the other side of this group of islands, there's an island called Barry Island, and my mother's uncle, his name was Bob Davis Sr., he raised his family on Barry Island, and he built at least 4 or more boats on Barry Island. Now somewhere just along the high tide mark out here at Donegal Head, or Köyhäniemi, is a petroglyph, and I'm trying to find it now. And I must be pretty close to a crow's nest. That crow seems pretty agitated that I'm here. And you can see this clay bank coming down from Donegal Head. Wow, look at that for a feather. That is an eagle feather, and it is huge. Now, unfortunately, there's a lot of driftwood logs piled right up above the high tide mark, and I think the petroglyph that I'm looking for is buried under some of these logs. So, unfortunately, this visit out to Köyhäniemi, I'm not going to be able to find it, but I could always come back in the future. Just getting a shot of me for posterity here at Köyhäniemi, Donegal Head, at the eastern tip of Malkosaari, Malcolm Island. Behind me there is Stubbs Island, or Ruusinlimpussaari. And in behind me over there is Vallis Salmi, or Blackfish Sound. I figured since I'm here at the closest point to Stubbs Island, or Ruusinlimpussaari, from Malkosaari, Malcolm Island, here at Köyhäniemi, I might as well zoom in and try and get a shot of it. Unfortunately, I didn't bring my gimbal with me, so it's not the most stable shot, but... And I just came across this dead sea lion here at Köyhäniemi, Donegal Head. And over in the distance there on Vancouver Island, you could kind of make out those buildings over there. That's Telegraph Cove. And there's a deer on the beach here eating some sea asparagus, looking back towards Mitchell Bay from Köyhäniemi, Donegal Head. And that deer let me walk right up to it. There's a lot of friendly deer here out towards Mitchell Bay. It doesn't even care that I'm here. It's just carrying on eating. See the deer off there towards the left? Doesn't even care that I'm here. Now I just want to note, since I'm right here in the area, that house above the hill there, this is just before Land's End Road, that once belonged to Jouko. And if you remember, if you're following along my video series, I once mentioned there's this rock, underwater rock, just off of Pierce Islands, between Pierce Islands and Cormorant Island, as you're looking from Rauhla, and it's called Joukonkari, which means Jouko's Rock. And it's named after Jouko, who lived up here. And I'm just gonna take a drive up Land's End Road. So before last year, in 2024, they paved this, but before then this was all just a dirt gravel road for as long as I can remember. And this is the very end of Land's End Road on Donegal Head, also known as Köyhäniemi in Finnish. If you were just to go a little further down around this bend, there's just a little farm that you turn around at. Other than that, this is the very end of Malkosaari, Malcolm Island. I always thought this was neat along the Mitchell Bay Road. There's this hedge here made out of alder trees. So right up in here, this was once the Turinen homestead. And my great-grandmother, Lydia Pupera, her maiden name was Turinen. And her brother, Sippi, once lived up in here. And Sippi and his brother Ed were boat builders out here in Mitchell Bay. And my grandmother, or my great-grandmother, sorry, Lydia Pupera, once lived in New York and married a man named Kalle Pupera. And she had two daughters, Paula, the oldest, and the youngest was Ellen Pupera. And Ellen was my grandmother, later named Ellen Lankvist. And after World War I ended, the day World War I ended, I should say, my great-grandfather, Kalle Pupera, died, and Lydia Pupera, my great-grandmother, moved here to live on the Turinen homestead with her brother, Sippi Turinen. And that's when my grandmother, Ellen Pupera, went to the Mitchell Bay School just down the road from here. Alright, that's all I got to say for today. So don't forget to like, share, and subscribe if you want to follow along my video series. And I'll see you all in the next video. Alright, ciao.